Shalom guys, welcome back to another episode here at YASHAV Ministries with Casa de Israel. Thank you for being here. If you like the content that we have on our channel, please like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put it in the comment section down below. Also share with any youth that is willing to listen and is interested in studying the Bible and its context and its truth and its legality, right? That's what we're trying to study in the book of Deuteronomy, right? The legal aspect of the Bible being a legal document, right? Established by God Himself. And so this week's Torah portion is Re'eh, which is, to see, right? And so this week's Torah portion starts on chapter 11, verse 26. And it states the following. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you listen to the mitzvot, the commandment of Adonai your God, that He's commanding you today. But the curse, if you do not listen to the mitzvot of Adonai your God, but turn from the way I am commanding you today, to go after other gods you have not known. Now, when Adonai your God brings you into the land you are going to possess, you have to set the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal. And you are to not cross the Jordan towards the west in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in Araba opposite of Gilgal beside the oaks of Moreh. For you are about to cross over the Jordan to go possess the land that Adonai your God is giving you. And you will possess it and dwell in it. You will take care to do all the statutes and all the ordinances that I am setting before you today. Right? So here, Israel is being given the understanding of what they're going to do before entering the land. Right? And Elohim presents the blessings and the curses. Right? The blessings, if you're willing to do his will in the land that He's about to give you, right? He's saying if you are willing to obey my commandments, I'll give you the blessings. But if you are disobedient, you will see the curses that come with disobedience, right? And so Elohim is warning them and giving them the understanding of what they are entailed to do when they go into the land and how they're going to go, right? He says you put the blessings on Mount Ebal or Mount Gerizim, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. You put the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal, right? On Mount Ebal, right? It says you are not to cross the Jordan towards the west, because they will encounter the Canaanites who dwell in Araba. You will go opposite Gilgal beside the oak of Moreh. Right, and so He's giving them specific instructions on how they are going to enter the land. And so here in the book that we're using to study, the book of Deuteronomy and its legal treaty and aspect, right? We are presented with the ancillary commandments, right? So they're going to be found here on chapters 12, right, to chapters 26. And so he says, having delineated the inner spirit of theocracy life, right, in chapters 5 through 11, Moses goes on to detail the ordinance of and institutions of the theocracy outward from chapters 12 through 26, right? Chapters 12, verse 1 through chapter 16, 17 are primarily concerned with the cultic ceremonial consideration requirements, right? So this is based on the cultic ceremonial consecration. This is how Israel is going to separate itself from the other nations, right? And so here, Israel is giving the way that they are going to basically purify the land of the abominations that the Canaanites and the other inhabitants have established, and how they're going to establish Elohim, right? He says the central interest of the laws of this section is to guarantee the thoroughgoing consecration to Yahweh, governing all the demands for tributary services in tithe, first fruits, and sacrificial offerings. It is the law of the central altar with which this section opens in chapters 12. Singleness of devotion to the Lord was safeguarded by the imposition of the severest penalties on all who enticed to or became guilty of apostasy. Right? So it says, chapter 12, these are the statutes and ordinances that you are to make sure to do in the land of the Adonai your Elohim, God of your fathers, has given you to possess. All the days that you live in the earth, you must utterly destroy all places where the nations that you will dispossess serve their gods, on the high mountains, on the hills, under every green tree. You have to tear down their altars, smash their pillars, burn their Asherah poles in the fire, and cut down the carved images of their gods. And you are to obliterate their name from the place. You're not to act like these towards Adonai your God. Rather, you are to seek only the place Adonai your God chooses from all your tribes to put his name to dwell there, and you will come. There you are to bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, your offering of your hand, your vow and free will offerings, the firstborn of your herd and your flock. There you and your household will eat before Adonai your God and rejoice in every undertaking of your hand, as Adonai your God has blessed you. You will not do all the things as we are doing here today. Everyone doing what is right in his own eyes. Right? So, for you are to have not yet come to the resting place and inheritance that Adonai your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and settle in the land Adonai your God enables you to inherit, he gives you rest from all your enemies around you, and you will dwell in safety. So, here Elohim is establishing that they will worship him wherever he states, right? Eventually it's Jerusalem and is the temple. Right, but before we get to the temple and before we get to Jerusalem, they have to purify the land, right? They have to destroy every image, every Asherah pillar, everything. Why? Because they are not to worship Elohim the way the nations worship their gods, right? And what does that imply? That we listen to Elohim's commandments. Why is that? Because if we don't listen to Elohim, we will, even unconsciously and naively, worship God the wrong way, right? And so God is giving us the structure of how he wants to be worshipped and where he wants to be worshipped, right? And what we have to do as students, as vassals, right, and the way that we have learned, and him being our suzerain, we have to obey his command and be willing to serve him, right? And so here Elohim is giving them specific instructions on how the cultic aspect of their worship is going to be. You will destroy everything that they have and everything that they do to worship their gods, and how you worship me is going to be established. Okay, so let's keep reading. And then the place Adonai your God chooses to make his name dwell, there you are to bring all that I command you, your burnt offering, your sacrifices, your tithes, the offering of your hand, and all your finest vow offerings that you vow to Adonai. Then you will rejoice before Adonai your God, you, your sons and daughters, your slaves, your maids, the Levite on your towns, for he has no portion or your inheritance among you. Be careful that you do not offer your burnt offerings in any places you see. Rather, do so only in the place Adonai chooses in one of your tribes. There you are to offer your burnt offerings, and there you are to do all that I command you, right? So here he alludes to two things. Be careful that you do not offer your burnt offerings any place you see, right? And over here it says, don't do what's right in your eyes, right? And so here Elohim is trying to help us understand, again, listen to me, focus on my voice and what I am commanding you, right? Right, that is what the structure of the commandments and the right now what we're hearing here is the cultic ceremonial consecrations. Right, the way that we're going to represent him is how we listen to what he wants. I think that's pretty simple, right? And so let's keep reading. However, you may slaughter and eat meat within all your gates, whether your soul desires, according to the blessing Adonai your God has given you. Either the unclean or clean may eat of it, as they would gazelle or deer. But you are not to eat the blood. You are to pour it out in the ground like water. You may not eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or new wine or oil, or the firstborn of your herd, or of your flock, or any of your vow offerings that you vow, or your free will offerings, or the offering of your hand. Rather, you are to eat them before Adonai your God in the place Adonai your God chooses. You, your son and daughter, your slave and maid, and the Levite within your gates, and you will rejoice before Adonai your God in every undertaking of your hand. Be careful that you do not neglect the Levite as long as you live on earth. And so, while we're not supposed to forget the Levite, remember, the Levite has no inheritance, right? The Levite depends of Elohim. Elohim is his inheritance. So, why does he want us to remember the Levite? Because he is the one interceding for us, right? And as long as we keep the Levites sustained, they will be in service and they will be able to intercede for us to the Father, or to Israel in this aspect. Okay? And so, he says, when Adonai your God enlarges your territory, that he has promised you, you say, I want to eat meat because your soul craves meat, then you may eat all your soul desires. And if the place Adonai your God chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you may slaughter any of your herd and flock that Adonai has given you, as I have commanded you, and you may eat within your gates all your soul desires. So, right here, Elohim is starting to establish the way of worship, the way of offering, the way he wants to be approached by his people, right? And so this is a common thing in ancient Near East, right? Sacrificial offerings, burnt offerings, right? Building a temple for their God, right? Where that God has established it. So Elohim is telling Israel how they're going to start building their kingdom, right? And it's based and fundamentally established on listening to Elohim's word, right? So, and then, right, by respecting the laws of where you should eat, where can you eat meat, that is an ordinance based on where you're going to sacrifice your meat, right? Well, altar, right? You're supposed to sacrifice the altar to Elohim's altar, right? Your offerings is brought to Elohim's temple, not to any other god, right? And you will not consecrate it any other way that the people in that land do so, okay? And so that is what the main point that Elohim is trying to establish with the people of Israel in chapters 12, right? And so here, the author of the book of the Treaty of the Great King, he says, Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 1 through 7, which is regarded as later as stands in contradiction to other biblical legislation. The Deuteronomy requirement has therefore been judged to be a later modification of earlier supposedly lesser practices. The book as a whole has been dated in the 7th century BCE and identified as the law book found in Josiah's day. Now, a more recent approach of critics is to resolve the supposed conflict of codes not by placing them in chronological sequence across the centuries, but as assigning to each different geographic cultic province. All right, so Deuteronomy is thought to represent the northern Levitical outlook, the central sanctuary in viewing of Shechem. Some critics have even allowed the centralization law in Deuteronomy and might represent a return to an earlier pre-monarchical ideal of Ampictonomy. Actually, the Deuteronomic law of the altar represented no radical departure from previous legislations on this subject. The fact Deuteronomy confirmed the fundamental principle formulated in the Sinaitic Book of the Covenant, according to which altars were authorized only at places where God recorded His name. That is, at the place of special divine revelation, particularly the divine revelation of God. Right? So, here, Elohim is establishing where He wants to be worshipped. And so, in chapter 13, Elohim warns us about false prophets. Right? And so, the false prophets says, wherever I command you, you must take care to do, and you are not to add to it or take away from it. Suppose a prophet or a dreamer of dreams rises up among you and gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or wonder he spoke to you comes true, while saying, let's follow other gods that you have not known, and let's serve them. Right? You must not listen to the words of the prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for Adonai your God is testing you to find out whether you love Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Adonai your God you will follow, and you will fear. Right? So Elohim here is stating that if a false prophet comes and tells you a dream, right, or shows you a sign or a wonder, and it comes true, right, and you see the fulfillment of this, but they say let's worship other gods, then you don't follow that person. Right? So somebody's teaching you, my young people, to disobey the Torah, or that the Torah is done away with, or that there is a new way to worship God, or that Jesus is teaching you a new way. Understand something. Yeshua will never teach you anything against the Word of God. Right? Yeshua followed the commandment, lived like a Jewish person. So he loved the Torah. Right? The only thing Yeshua was against was the tradition that suppressed the people and the actions of unjust and unrighteousness. That's all he was against. And he had a purpose to bring salvation to his people and to redeem them from the penalty of death. Okay? So, he says, you're supposed to love only your Elohim and trust Him and fear Him. Right? His mitzvot you will keep. His voice you will listen. Him you will serve. To Him you will cling. The prophet or dreamer of dreams must be put to death, for he has spoken falsehood against Adonai your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery, to entice you from the way Adonai your God commanded you to walk. So you will purge the evil from your midst. And suppose a brother, your mother's son, or your son or daughter, or your wife of your bosom, or your best friend of your soul misleads you secretly, saying, let's go and serve other gods that you and your fathers have not known, from among the gods of the peoples around you, near you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other. You are not to give in or listen to him. Your eye is not to pity them, and you are not to spare or conceal him. Instead, you will surely put him to death. Right? So now, again, this is the laws of the time. Right? Obviously, right now, anyone that teaches you against the Torah or against God's word, obviously, understand that you will not put anybody to death. Understand that. Now, it is very important to understand that you shall not follow people that will teach you against God's word. Okay? Don't follow them, but don't put nobody to death. I just want to make sure that you understand that. I'm just clarifying. Just want to make sure that you understand that. Okay. Now, so It says, suppose you hear it said in one of your cities, which Adonai your God is giving you to dwell in, the worthless fellows have gone out from among you and enticed the inhabitants of the city, saying, let's go and serve other gods that you have not known. Then you are to investigate and search out and inquire thoroughly. If indeed it is true and the matter certain that this abomination has been done in your midst, you will surely strike down the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword. And so here, right, Elohim in chapter 13 is establishing that the main message of chapter 13 with the false prophets is this: you do not listen to anybody that teaches you against the Torah or against God's word. And in the moment Israel is going into the land, right, in God's land where he has established his name, the people of Israel were supposed to keep the land holy. How you do that? You listen and obey only one master, which is Elohim. You only obey one Caesarean, Elohim, right? And if anybody in the land or around the land of Elohim that was leading people astray or being stumbling block, they were supposed to cast them out of the community. Now, can we do that today? Like I said, we're not, right? We cannot put nobody to death. That's not our authority or our jurisdiction, right? But we can separate ourselves from people that are trying to lead us in disobedience or in contradiction of God's word, right? Because as we keep reading, we understand that Elohim is saying, obey my mitzvot, obey my commandments, be true to me, fear me, right? And so the concept of this week's Torah portion, the curses and the blessings, is an important fact that you have to understand that Elohim is trying to establish a structure, right, and a way of approaching him, right? He's in the next coming chapters, right? Obviously, we're not going to read every chapter, right? But Elohim here, like I said, he's establishing his ancillary commandments, right? And so the cultus ceremony, consecration, an alliance to God's altar, right? Resistance to apostasy, right? Anybody that wants to go against Elohim, the fail obligation, and the tributary pilgrimage. Clean foods for holy people, right? Here is interesting, right? You are to you are the children of Adonai. You are not to cut yourselves or shave your forehead for the dead, for you are a holy people, and to Adonai your God, from all the peoples on the face of the earth, Adonai has chosen you to be his treasure people. You are not to eat any detestable thing. These are the animals you may eat. And he tells you the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roebuck, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. Among the animals you may eat. And so he goes on a listing of the animals that you may eat, right? And so here then he says, yet of those that chew cud or have split hoof, you're not to eat: the camel, the hare, the rabbit, chapter 7, because they chew the cud but do not split the hoof, and they are unclean to you. The pig, because it splits the hoof but does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. You're not to eat their meat or touch their carcasses. All that are in the waters. And so he's establishing the purity laws, right, that he established in the book of Leviticus that we will study in the future, right? And so this is important structures that keep you clean, right, physically, and pure in the presence of God, right? And so Elohim is establishing what you can eat, what you cannot eat, right? And so it's interesting because the God, the creator of heaven and earth, is giving us the blueprint on how we're supposed to approach him and honor him. And I think it's great that we have the opportunity to do that. Here it talks about the tithe and remembering the Levite. And so here it talks about the law of how we are supposed to set aside a tenth of all the yield of your seed that comes from the field year by year, right? So obviously, like I've stated before, the people of Israel are in an agricultural time, right? So agriculture, the seed, the food, the fruit of their labor in the land was the way that they repaid their God and the Levites for their service, and Elohim for their protection, right? And obviously Elohim doesn't doesn't eat these offerings, but the mere action of you bringing the offering demonstrates that you have a heart of thankfulness for God and Elohim, right? And so here he's establishing his tithing laws, right? His tributary pilgrimages. So chapter 15 is the Shemitah, right? The cancellation of all debts, right? At the end of every 7 years, you are to cancel debts, right? Every creditor is to release what he has loaned to his neighbor, and he must not force his neighbor or his brother to repay. For Adonai, debt cancellation has been proclaimed. A foreigner you may force, but your hand is to release whatever your brother owes you. However, there should be no poor among you. It's interesting. For Adonai will surely bless you in the land Adonai your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess. If only you would carefully listen to the voice of Adonai your God, being careful to do all these mitzvot, these commandments that I am commanding you today. For Adonai your God will bless you as he had promised you. So you will lend to many nations, but not borrow. You will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. If there is poor man among you, any of your brothers within any of your gates, in your land that Adonai your God is giving you, you are not to harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother. Rather, you must surely open your hand to him, and you must surely lend him enough for his deed. Whatever he is lacking, watch yourself, so there's no unworthy thing in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of the cancellation debt is near, and your eye is evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing. Then he may call out Adonai against you, and it will be a sin upon you. You must surely give to him, and your heart is not to be grieved when you give to him. For because of this thing, Adonai your God will bless you and all your work and every undertaking of your hand. Now, this is where we're going to stop, because I feel like it's important to establish this. Elohim here is establishing the Shemitah year. Right? And so Yeshua, when he came, he declared the year of Jubilee. Right? And that's when all debts are forgiven. But here, Elohim's saying that Elohim is prospering them and is going to prosper them in the land, that there shouldn't be no poor among them because of their fruit that Elohim is going to give them and how blessed they're going to be in their obedience, right? Not because of grace only, right? They have to show action and obey, right? In the land, there will be no poor. But if there's poor, you are supposed to do justice and righteousness. This is what Yeshua is encountering in his time, right? Yeshua's argument is that the leaders of the time were not doing justice and righteousness, right? And so Yeshua taught us that we have to do this. We're supposed to give to those that are in need, because Elohim has given us. God has given you. He has provided for you when you were poor and in need. Elohim gave you. So when you are fruitful, you are commanded to remember that you were poor in one moment. And that moment that you were poor, Elohim remembered you. And in the same way, you are to remember those. And when you see a poor man, you remember that Elohim remembered you. So you remember your brother. And sometimes, most of the time, you can remember those that might not be in covenant. Because when you see a poor person, right? When I see a poor person in the light, right? I always do my best to give them something, right? Yesterday or 2 days ago, I was going to eat. Got something from Taco Bell, and I'm going to Taco Bell and I see a homeless lady, and I'm like, I gotta get her something. And then I saw another homeless man, and so I go into Taco Bell, and so I order. What I've done is, when I go buy something and I see a homeless man, I try to buy them exactly what I would want, right? And so I bought them exactly what I wanted. I bought 2 orders for each, and so I got like 3 tacos or whatever. And so when I have to wait, right? Ever since coronavirus and all this, right? So I have to wait, and so I'm parking to wait, and I look through my mirror and I see another homeless man. And so I had bought, I think it was 6 tacos. 6 tacos and 2 drinks. And I'm like, oh man, what do I do? And so what I did was I split it in 2. So I gave 2 to one, 2 to the other, and 2 to the other. Right? And so obviously I had a situation where one of them didn't accept my gift, right? It didn't accept my justice on behalf of Elohim. The person told me that they didn't want the food, and I understood that, and it's fine, right? But because of that, you don't stop bringing justice to the world. You don't stop bringing the image of Elohim to the world, right? What Elohim is trying to do here is saying that when Israel was supposed to take the land, they take care of the poor, and there shouldn't be no poor in the land. Why? Because Elohim is just with everybody. And so the same way he's just with everybody, he expects us to be just with our brother and for those that are in need. Because in that moment, the world sees a different nation. As they see a city on a mountain that is bright in justice and in righteousness. Right? So for this week, right, we have been studying the structure, the legal aspect of the Torah portions. But for the closing of this week, I want to say that please stick to the justice and righteousness of our kingdom, because in the aspects of blessings and curses, right, Elohim says, I put the blessing and the curse in your obedience and disobedience. As we're blessed, as we're obedient, remember to give the hand of those that are struggling, of those that might need your strength, right? Just like Elohim supported you in your weakest moments and gave you strength, you are to be an image of Elohim and give others strength and guidance and direct them to the Father, so that they will be able to get to know Elohim and get to know his righteousness. But the only way that we will be able to do this is if we're a community, if we're united, and if we're representing the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of Moses, of Yeshua. As long as we're holding ourselves to justice and righteousness and obeying our Father's commandments, we'll be able to reflect Elohim's kingdom in the world. That's it for what I have for this week. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Shabu Tov and Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for watching.